Okay, so this is my first unofficial podcast talking about a bit more in depth about grandparents, and if you have an emotionally immature parent, if you've got no contact with a parent, then should your parent have access to your children? Now, I made a video a couple weeks ago saying that if you don't currently have a relationship with your parent, then they don't get access to your children. And for me, that's such a no-brainer because it doesn't make any sense. Like, you wouldn't let some stranger on the street have a relationship with your children. And why? Because you don't know them. They're not close to you. You don't know them. You can't trust them. Why would you let someone who you don't know in your children's lives? Like, we do this all the time, and these different relationships in different areas of our lives. And the way that a stranger becomes a friend is they build trust, right? You build a relationship. There's mutual trust and respect and understanding. And what happens when you have an emotionally immature, toxic, and narcissistic parent, and just for those of you who don't know, I use toxic as like an umbrella term for parents who are emotionally immature and narcissistic. So emotionally immature is one side of the spectrum where they're just like, they just never really grew up, okay? They're not really malicious or like mean to be mean, but they're just kind of thoughtless and self-absorbed, and so they don't really think about you. They just tend to think about themselves and how things are affecting them and what's going on in their world. So these are the moms who are like, oh, like you're having a conversation with her and she's like telling you about all of her friends and everything that you don't really care about. Like, it's like those kinds of things. So it's kind of harmless, but also like, okay, mom, no, I actually don't care about those people. I want to hear about you. So that's kind of an example. Narcissistic parents, on the other hand, can be, depending on if they're an overt or a covert narcissist. And this is something I go into more in depth in my Toxic Mom Recovery Guide, just breaking down these different aspects of a toxic parent. But narcissists tend to be more overt. They tend to be a bit more controlling. Can be a bit more aggressive. If your mom is more of a covert narcissist, she's going to be heavy into the manipulation, all the controlling aspects, the guilting. Oh, well, I'm so sad, poor me. Like, you're really hurting me by what you're doing to me. And it's really not about them taking accountability. So that's the main thing when it comes to dealing with a toxic parent, is that they are not going to be able to take accountability. They're not going to. They will fight you tooth and nail because they cannot, because of their own wounding. And it's sad. They have their own stuff, their own wounds, their own experiences. And because they never got the healing that they needed, because they were never able to move on, now they are perpetuating these unhealthy dynamics and these unhealthy dysfunctional responses in their relationships now with you, and it's carrying on down to your kids because they will not take accountability for how they're treating you. So this is really where a lot of relationships between adult children and their emotionally immature parents, this is where their relationship really starts to unravel. And I think a lot of like millennials and like Gen Z and stuff especially, we've learned so much and we're so aware of emotional things and how stuff happens. And this research on childhood trauma affecting adults is not new, but I think it is becoming more widespread and more talked about and acknowledged about how important it is, those early years, those childhood years, even those teenage years, like every stage of development, like every child needs and deserves to have unconditional love and acceptance, to feel like they're safe, to feel like they're loved, to feel like they're cared for. And so when as adults now, we're realizing, oh, wow, when my parents did this, it really wounded me. And so, of course, you want to have a close relationship with your parent and say, hey, when you do this now, because there can be actions that your parents are doing now that is triggering you and taking you back to that time. It's that similar experience that you had as a kid. And so now as an adult, you're like, why is this making me so furious? Why do I feel so angry? Why do I feel so hurt? Like, why do I feel so powerless in this situation? And usually it's because there was something that happened back in your childhood. And so now you're being triggered from that event, which is completely fine. Like, that's how it works. Our brain makes these incredible connections. It's like, oh, well, when something similar happens, this is the emotion that we felt then. This is how it felt. And so we're going to bring it into this present moment. Like, we've already got this taken care of. And so when you bring up these issues with your parents, say, hey, can you please stop this? Like setting a boundary, asking them to stop harmful behavior. When you're saying, hey, can you stop this? And then they get defensive, they get mad, oh, or they gaslight you. It didn't happen that way. You're being so sensitive. Like, I don't remember that. Like, you're just making stuff up, belittling your experience. That is the beginning of the end of your relationship with your parent, because they cannot be that safe place for you, yet again, to express how you're feeling, to say, oh, wow, I'm so sorry. Like, how can I make it better? What can I do to adjust? That's what a healthy parent does. A healthy parent says, okay, how can I help? How can I help you resolve this? How can I bring peace and healing to this moment? Or even to say, I'm so sorry, like, I don't know what I can do. Can you please tell me? And so that's what an emotionally healthy and emotionally mature parent does. They're not going to do it perfectly, but at least they're trying. And an emotionally immature or toxic parent, they're going to go the complete other way, and they're not going to take accountability. They're not going to take responsibility. And then they'll go even so far as to say, well, it's your fault. You're the problem. And how incredibly damaging is that? And so when someone is, you've set boundaries with your parent, you've said, hey, I need this behavior to stop or else I can't be around you. And they refuse, they throw it back in your face, and so you take some space, right? You take some distance. And generally, like, people who end up no contact with their parents, it's not it's not the first line of defense, right? It's not the first thing like, oh, well, you upset me, so chop, get out of my life. That's not what's happening here. It's generally a lot of attempts and tons of conversations and hours of thought on the part of the child, the adult now, to be able to say, hey, like, I'm trying to maintain our relationship. I want to be connected to you. And every attempt at that, every attempt at a real, genuine connection keeps getting pushed to the side, keeps getting rejected. And because sadly, these parents who are emotionally immature and narcissistic, their relationships are only surface level. They can't really go deep because they haven't accessed that depth within themselves. And a lot of people, especially nowadays, and I think it's probably always been this way, like, desire like real, genuine connection. Like, you want to have a conversation with someone who knows you, who understands, because there's nothing better than feeling like you're known, that you're seen, that you're loved, and you're cared for. And so when these parents can't be that safe place, and instead they become an unsafe place, they become this like contentious person in your life, why would you want to be around them? Of course, you're going to start taking more physical space. You're going to take more distance. You're going to be removing yourselves from them because they can't give you that. And that's okay. There's, if you're struggling and feeling like, oh, well, they need to give me that, and stuff, like, the honest truth is they just can't. And so part of your healing is to accept, like, okay, they cannot meet me here. So what do I need to do to be able to be around them? And some people, they find ways to work around. You're like, yeah, that's just how mom is. And you know what? I'm just going to be around her anyways. And that's fine. Like, if that is your choice, like, that's totally okay. But there's some people who, after conversation after conversation, after put down, that you're just like, why am I even trying anymore? And there can be a point where you say, this is a boundary. I need you to respect this. I need you to make some effort or we can't move on. And depending on what the boundary is, it could even push your parent so far as to cut off contact with you. Say, don't contact us anymore. And that's what happened to me. Is I tried for years to communicate boundaries, to try to figure out a way to make things work. And then I was finally like, I need this or we can't move forward. That was when they're like, don't talk to us. We're done. Not interested anymore. And so that's really sad. But that was, they're adults. They're free to make their own choices just like you are. And I think so many times, we put parents on this pedestal. We're saying, oh, well, I still need them to give me love and attention and affection and validation. And especially if you had a toxic parent, because they raised you that way. They raised you to desire and to like, that felt like love, right? That approval, that validation. Oh, good job. You're such a good kid. Like, I'm so proud of you, or whatever that thing was that you did that got you that emotional gratification that felt like love. And so now, like, you're still longing for that. And one of the biggest things that is so important is for you to learn how to give yourself that love, that comfort, that validation, to be able to hold yourself and say, okay, I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling really sad. I'm feeling hurt. I'm feeling upset. And say, and that's okay. And it's going to be okay. And to give yourself that parenting and that love that you needed. And so, anyway, it's like, when your relationship has deteriorated so much with your parent to the point that you're no longer in relationship with them, why on earth would you let them have access to your children when they can't respect you enough to be bothered enough to have a good relationship with you? And I understand, like, there's tons of different situations. There's lots of reasons why. And I have a lot of compassion and understanding for that. But there's so many people, they're like, well, I had some like pretty crazy comments on Instagram on this post, because they're like, oh, well, you're just punishing your mother. I would never do that. And that's fine. That's completely your choice. If you feel like you want your mom around your kids, that's fine. But that's not what I'm going to do with mine, because I can't trust my mom enough to honor me, to respect me enough, to be a healthy person with me. How could I trust her to be a healthy person with my kids? How could I trust her enough to be that safe and loving and nurturing relationship for them when she can't do it for me? And so that's where I think the disconnect comes. It's like, but no, like, you don't, parents, they do things for us, right? They brought us into the world. They raise us. They, meet the basic needs, hopefully. A lot of times they don't. There's a lot of emotional needs that get neglected. And so, but at the end of the day, like, that was their responsibility. It was their responsibility to raise you, to take care of you. And if they have now become a person who's unhealthy or unsafe for you to be around, then it's your responsibility to protect your children. It's your responsibility to protect yourself from their negative behavior. Nobody deserves to be around someone who's so negative and cuts you down all the time, or second guessing you, or making you doubt yourself. That's not healthy for anybody, no matter who it is. And so it's time to start seeing our parents as people and say, wow, like, I can see them and I understand why they are the way that they are. You probably know their backstory better than anybody. You know their origin story. You know why they are the way that they are. And that still doesn't make it okay for them to treat you like garbage. It doesn't make it okay for them to then say, oh, well, I just want to have a relationship with my grandkids. No, that's a privilege of having a good relationship with the parent first. Just like thinking back to that like analogy earlier of like the stranger, like, no, like the stranger becomes a friend. They become trusted. And then when someone is safe, when you know that you can trust them, that's when they get access to your kids. Your kids are your most precious, not like possession, but the most precious thing you have. Why would you just let anybody be around them just because their title is grandma? It doesn't make sense to me. And so, like, people are free to disagree, and that's completely fine. That's, you get to do exactly what you want to do. I'm going to do what I want. But I think a lot of it comes down to, like, still some of that, like, trying to get approval and love and acceptance from your parents, and saying, oh, well, I'm going to be the bigger person. I have a sibling who did this, and they're like, well, I'm just going to be the bigger person. I'm going to, they're going to be in my life, and, that they're just going to have to deal. And that's fine. You are completely free to do whatever you want, but don't tell me that I'm wrong because I don't want my kids around someone I can't trust. If you want to let your parents have a relationship with your kids, even if they're not having a good relationship with you, that's completely fine. That is your choice. But I don't think that's really what's best for you or for your kids. It's going to cause more stress, potential problems down the road. And what are you sacrificing? Like, what are you giving up in order to try to get your parents' approval for that, like, last little, like, nugget of affection? Oh, well, at least they love my kids. They couldn't love me, but they could love my kids. Like, that's just really sad. You and your kids deserve better than that. We'll be talking about some other things in the weeks to come. I'm really just kind of like dipping my toe into this because I know not everybody wants to hear a monologue about different toxic parent things, but I think some of it does need to be addressed. I think it needs to be dealt with and done in more of a quicker than I can do it in a 60-second TikTok video. Like, it's just, you can only do so much. It's more of the like smash and grab kind of thing with the TikTok, but I do want to get more just dive into it a bit more in a longer format because there is a lot of nuance. There's a lot of aspects to it, and I think that they deserve to be discussed. So I'll see you next time.